And you're starting to record. That's okay. So within that language of the interlocal agreement for the protections of the smaller communities, we had set up that when we are voting, there's a weighted vote on specific items. And at least one member of each community has to vote in favor in order for that option or that vote to pass. That way, the smaller communities are not being overtaken by our larger community. With that, I mean, it's a pretty easy formula, really. At the end of the day, it comes down to what do you want to accomplish? And how do you want to get there? And sometimes, as with any negotiation, any conversation that you have, you're going to put everything on the table, but you have to be willing to allow some things to fall off the table for the better of your communities, the better of your residents, in order to be able to make that happen. And I think we are now getting to a point where more and more communities are needing to really focus on how they can share these resources. And I know that Damariscotta, as well as Newcastle, am I correct in that, Kevin? Newcastle, thank you. Are just probably one of the first towns that are now starting to look at taking these options, and I think, or taking these views. And I think I applaud you guys for at least taking on this and having it be a consideration. But I'll hand it over to Chris to really talk about, or I'll actually answer any questions if you have for as far as formula or contract wise, and then I'll hand it over to Chris so he could talk about maintenance and how he actually makes it work.
Yeah, I guess I have a question for you, Sandra. Ensuring workflow. Do the three, so your oversight board, or your is all of the 15 members
Yes, it
of
is.
5-member select boards. That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, so
Yep.
when you decide on work plan, do they make that decision about what's getting done? Because with a crew of 4, and you have some summer work, they might be in one town and not the other one on a given day. And how does the
Right.
community perceive that?
So
I guess
for as
that's a
far
question to
as
some extent.
Yeah, for as far as the day-to-day operations, we handle that internally. We essentially tell the select boards what our plans are, where the project areas are going to be. We do have each community make their own decision for as far as what streets are going to be paved. We essentially present a plan to them. We say these are the streets that Chris has evaluated that are in the most desire and need. We go out on a bid process for cost saving measures, obviously, but at the end of the day, the select board decides whether or not they want to invest in that capital road infrastructure, or if they don't. They do make that decision. But the day-to-day operations, that's handled internally with my road commissioner and the highway crew.
Well, I'm thinking about one of the benefits of having a crew is that they're able to take care of things like ditching ahead of, and some tree trim removal ahead of the capital roads
Yes.
project. So you're saving some money on that end when you're contracting to do the paving piece. But if
Right.
one town says we're going to invest $300,000 this year on road repair, and we want the small crew to be focused on our road, how does that impact the budget for everybody else? So it's just thinking about how that fair and equitable piece plays out here.
Yeah, so the interlocal agreement has some language in there that states that each town has to contribute towards their paving projects. That's a must. That way, one town doesn't fall back on or get left behind. How much that contribution is really up to each select board. But the day-to-day, for as far as we're going to be in this town this day or this town and another day, the actual operations of that falls with my road commissioner, and he decides on how those projects are going to look, and presents that to the select board, not the other way around.
Okay. Is Chris your road commissioner?
This is my road commissioner. He has been with the towns for over 16 years and has worked in the highway department those full 16 and has been the road commissioner for the past 10 years, I believe.
Yeah, so as far as, the day-to-day operations in the highway department, um, each town has a certain amount of road mileage. Everything's set up on a 12-year rotation. So for instance, like the town of Castle Hill, we do 0.82 miles of road there per year. Chapman is 1.05 and Mapleton is 2.6. So we, go around. We're a year ahead. We try to do our groundwork for everything that we're going to pave the year before. So it gives it a chance to settle. If there's any cross trenches that you pave back in that you still have a bump in, you have time to address them the next year. So there could be, say, for instance, 1,000 feet of ditching and 4 culverts to replace in Castle Hill. That would be what would be on the work plan for this upcoming summer. You always get things that arise that you have to, there could be driveway pipes, washouts, shoulder work, tree removal, whatever. But each year you have a certain allotted mileage that you take care of. So naturally, like with Mapleton it has the most road mileage. So you could probably say there's more work that's done in that one community just because of the road mileage.
But they also contribute more as a percentage of the budget.
Yes. Yeah. They're
Yes, they do.
like 51% or whatever it figures out to. But
Yep.
yep.
Hogging it, guys. Questions? Chris, Sandra?
And if you ever want to review how that language looks like, we do have it up on our website too, under the joint agreement. I think it's a great model, like I said, and it was something that was drafted by our select board. This was not something that we went out with an attorney on. These were our select board members, I like to call them the forefathers, that all sat down. They were all back in the day, probably potato farmers, most of them, and sat down and really wanted to see what was going to be the best for their community and how to be able to make that run. And I think they did one hell of a job at what they were able to accomplish and to be able to carry that forward for 25 plus years. Yeah.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I did steal some things out of it as I drafted our own. So thank you for that.
I just want to clarify one
Yeah.
thing. You have a 4-person road crew that deals with 70 plus miles of road. That's plowing and everything.
Yes.
You all don't sleep much.
We just make it happen is all we do. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
We make it happen. Absolutely. Could we bring on a fifth and really allow Chris to get even more cushionier in that seat that he looks like he's very comfortable in? Absolutely. We probably could do that. But yeah.
You don't bring on any seasonal temp crew in the wintertime or summer to scale up for projects or winter maintenance?
No, not unless we have somebody out sick or on extended
Injury.
leave or whatever. The only thing that we might do in the wintertime, if we get bad windstorms up here to where the roads close in on us, sometimes we'll hire a contractor to come help us push banks back, hire a loader type of thing. But as far as the trucks, the routes take between 2.5 and 3.5 hours a run type of thing. There's basically one truck in Castle Hill, one that splits Mapleton and Chapman, and then one that's solely in Mapleton.
We do contract out for roadside mowing in the summer.
Yes. Yep.
But for as far as the regular ditch work and road work, that's something that's handled internal.
because it's upon us, I'm curious, for Chris, with the three towns, how is it you balance the expectations of three different communities with regards to, how the roads are treated and are drivable in the wintertime? Is that something that the committee of 15, as they come together, like you just all agree, this is the standard we aim to meet? Do you have different standards for each community, or do you have the pleasure, if you will, of just deciding what the standard's going to be based on your budget?
No, I get to make the calls. I guess it'd be up to my standards and how we want to keep the road systems. There's no per se road. Well, you'll have bedroom communities, cul-de-sacs and things like that probably wouldn't get maintained as much as your main arteries. The traffic's slow. Sometimes, they might only get plowed twice a storm to where the other roads get plowed 3 times. Other than that, I mean, the public likes to see them bare and black, You
Yeah.
try to maintain whatever your budget can afford and whatever time allows you to, but
I'm gonna make an assumption that you don't have a whole lot of sidewalk.
we have 1,900 feet of sidewalk, and it's right on Main Street. And that would be it.
Is that kept clear, or is that up to individuals to shovel in front of their house or whatnot?
No, that's up to us. It's something that if it goes a couple of days before we can get to it, then that's what happens. But we try to clean them every storm.
What's your mix of asphalt roads versus gravel roads?
Oh, let's see. We have about 11 miles of dirt.
Okay, so it's primarily asphalt.
Yes, one-way miles, 11 miles of dirt.
And we have switched on what we were, every year Chris and I talk about calcium versus, what is it called? Your calcium versus your liquid mixtures that we purchase, and what's the better options? Yeah, thank you. What's the best to get the road clear the quickest as well? Because 77 miles of road, that's a lot of road mileage. That's just one way. That's not back. That's just going forward. 77 miles, they still gotta have 77 miles to come back on. So we always are looking for our calcium mixture versus our salt mixture versus the go be gone, whatever it's called, goo stuff that we put on the road. You know what I'm talking about. Turns it into slush and everybody hates it, but keeps the roads clear.
Well, we can't apply that in downtown anyway. Just salt.
Okay.
So
Now
Hmm?
where in relation to your road miles do you have multiple sand salt sheds, or is there one sort of centrally located?
No, we have one salt sand shed that's located right in the yard.
And
And
that's everybody works out of that same.
Yes. Yeah.
load
And
your
they
own
were, and they were very smart in where they built the town office as well. So our town office and our highway department, as well as our sand salt shed and our fire department building, are all within a 15-acre lot that we have. So, and it is centrally located between the 3 communities. So it does make it easier to be able to house all of our vehicles centrally, as well as our fire departments, as well as the town office, and for our residents.
Great.
That's a
Sandra,
harder problem.
Yeah, too bad we have a river in the middle.
There is that.
Sandra, when it comes to like the interlocal agreement, and I can't remember the exact frequency at which it kind of gets revisited, but you had mentioned the term of the interlocal is good for a certain amount of time, but also that with whatever frequency it was, that the towns revisit maybe it's annual, revisit the cost sharing of the allocation of the burden. Can you talk through how that works and the feedback from the community on that?
Yeah, so we have a cost share formula that is has 3 different formulas in it, depending upon which budget that it's needed. So we have the municipal side that is deprived of, like our assets or anything that was like our municipal building, reserve accounts. All of that is under the administrative or the ownership share, which is 60-20-20. Then you have the general operating formula, which is for everything outside of that's jointly owned, that outside of the highway department. That formula is made up of valuation as well as population of the communities. And then you have the highway formula, which is completely all road mileage. That's just specifically for the highway budget. So each year I'm looking at, because your state value changes, and every, I think it's 10 years, you're supposed to also have a census. I don't know any of us really believe the last census that was done because it was done during COVID, but it is what it is. Those are the numbers. But each year we're looking at the state value, and I'm plugging in those new numbers every single year, presenting that to my joint board for approval, which overall reflects what their annual cost share is going to be. This is something that we look at on a yearly basis. The overall interlocal agreement itself is on a 15-year rotation. And we review the language, we review it with each community separately, then we review it as a joint, especially if there's any conversation within the actual interlocal agreement language itself that may want to be changed or altered. So far, this has held up three rounds at least between the 3 communities. We bring this in front of during our annual town meeting in March, and most of the communities receive it really, really well, because they understand at the end of the day, it's a cost saving measure for them. If they were having to pay for these resources that they get, that the other 2 towns are essentially paying a portion or share into, it's going to cost them a lot more in the end. So sometimes just being a good neighbor helps save your pocket.
Do you get any feedback from the community at times about, why contracting these services out shouldn't be considered? Or is it kind of all in on this agreement for how long it's been going?
It's been all in on this agreement for how long it's been going. You also have to take in mind that when they started this agreement, part of this is also putting money away onto reserve accounts. I'm proud to say that we're probably one of the few communities that do not have to step out to get any loans whatsoever, whether we're looking at a fire truck or a plow truck. That is something that can be 100% paid for through our reserve accounts. And still have money left over. You don't get that with contract services. You just don't.
Absolutely not.
Well, congrats on that part.
Yeah.
I'll say this, yeah.
You guys, that's a great principle to have. If you're a town
It
trying to
is.
pay.
Absolutely.
So how do you manage those reserve accounts? Because Andy and I were talking just before everybody showed up a little bit about the termination would be a piece that'd be interesting to talk to you guys about. But also, if you are 2 towns putting money away every year to pay for those capital improvements, and for some reason the towns decide they don't individually decide, one of them says, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. How do you return that money? Because I assume one town is acting as the managing municipality on behalf of the employees too.
Nope. That's what's so great about this as well, and so unique. All 3 towns have ownership. So we essentially created a corporation in which they are the stakeholders. The 3 towns are the stakeholders. And they have ownership in personnel. They have ownership in assets. They have ownership in reserves, as well as bank accounts. So all 3 towns have a percentage share. And it's based upon what that share is in the interlocal agreements. We had to go to state legislature to get even approved to share a checking account for all 3 towns. as well. So that groundwork's already been laid for any community that wants to start this in their area. You essentially do have to create a corporation. You do have to create that each town is the asset owner, and those the select board are the members and are in control of the corporation. You do still have your annual audit. So if one town decides, let's say my smaller community, Castle Hill, decides that they want to pull out, we then look at what is their percentage share, what is in our reserve accounts, and our reserve accounts are completely separate from our regular operating budget as well. It's in its own separate ICS account. It's earning its own interest completely separate from our regular checking and operating. So if that ever does happen, then we do actually pull those funds out and pay back the town what they have contributed in, or what's in that pot right now, minus
Their share.
minus their share of what's in there currently. And then of course there's that ownership aspect of vehicles. I mean, it gets hairy. It can get hairy because when you look at it, it's like, you gotta pay them back probably for even the assets that we still have on hand too. So it can be a scary thing when you're venturing into this, but at the end of the day, I think the benefit by far outweighs that risk. And once the community start to see that return, why would you want to pull out? Why would you want to cost yourself more money at the end of the day?
Yeah.
I get a question,
Politics.
just in terms of
It can be politics.
not
Yeah.
having that in your towns. What's your mill rate?
12, 13, and 13.
Huh?
Which population?
You can,
Total population is just a little under 3,000.
between the three, but it's weighted, Mapleton's is about Newcastle size.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mapleton is about 2,800 in population. But like I said, these were, I really don't like the new census numbers because I think they're crap. And I know Mapleton has a much higher population than that. We've had so much growth with just subdivisions that have popped up left and right that there's no way I can swallow that pill from the Census Bureau that says that we went down in population. They just simply did not do their job, but the numbers are what they've reflected, so that's what I have to use.
Yeah, and please tell me you're not taking over those cul-de-sacs when they get built as for the roads.
We can, because we actually have an ordinance in place that the road has to be constructed to our standards. And it has to actually be tested to our standards in order for us to be able to take that on.
That's more work for your small crew.
It can be, yeah.
All right.
But don't be afraid of more work. Could just end up being that you're hiring a new employee to come on board to help carry that load. Don't be afraid of new work, because that means that there's growth that's happening in your community too, which means you're doing good things.
More population, more tax base.
Potentially.
That's right. Absolutely.
Where there's water and sewer.
We don't have water. All three communities are all well water communities, but we do have a public sewer system in Mapleton.
And is that managed separately?
It is a separate district. However, there has been a lot of conversation about bringing it on board. Just not there yet as a department in the town. I do foresee that happening probably within the next 10 years.
So what about Chris and his crew? Are they employees of Mapleton or are they employees of this joint venture corporation?
We are all employees of the corporation, all three towns.
All three town staff are part of the corporation, not the towns.
Correct.
So your
No.
contract.
To say it's the other way around. The employees are municipal employees that are owned by all three towns.
Right, so it's that corporation that manages the
Yeah.
HR side.
Correct. Yeah, it's under that corporation umbrella.
So does the corporation in effect send a bill, if you will, to the tax collector of each of those towns to say, I'm assuming, and maybe not, are there additional costs for each community beyond what you've created this corporation to oversee? So
No.
every,
The corporation is just needed for as far as the ownership percentage, right? The towns run like every other town. We do our own bills internally. We do our own tax base internally. We send that out right from the municipal office. I have one treasurer, one tax collector. I have 3 town clerks, and I have 4 highway crew member. I got 1 code enforcement officer. All of them take care of all 3 towns.
But the taxpayers of one town get a bill that's from essentially the corporation that provides their municipal
No, it's
side
from
of
the
the bill.
town.
From the
The towns,
towns, plural. is
All
meant-
have-
The town, correct. The towns are their own entity, but the bill comes from the town. It looks just like everybody else's bill. It says right on the top of it, the towns of Mapleton, Castle Hill, and Chapman.
okay.
so
Are your employees unionized? What's your payroll?
Our employees are not unionized, thank God.
Hear that, Chris?
give me any idea.
Chris might have a better, I don't know. He comes from a union background. We have a tip every once in a while on it, but
Chris,
our
anything-
payroll. Go ahead. Sorry, Andy.
You're gonna finish your payroll question, that's okay.
Yeah. So you want to know what my payroll? That's the highest percentage of my budget is payroll, honestly. But you need people to be able to do the work.
You also do your own repair work?
The majority of it, and I mean, we have
Majority.
some pretty qualified personnel in our shops, and we try to do everything we can in-house.
What size equipment are you using?
What
For trucks.
size? What size of equipment? They're all wheelers.
They're all, 10-wheelers?
Yep, all 10-wheelers. Yeah.
They need it up there.
We do need it up here.
And what Presque Isle's your closest, like if you needed parts, injectors, whatever, you're what, 10 miles from Presque Isle?
We're about 7 miles from Presque Isle, and then the next closest dealers that we deal with would either be in Holton, which is about 45 miles,
Yeah,
or Fort Kent, which is about 65 miles.
so it's like us in Portland or Bangor.
Yeah.
Similar, so. Yeah.
Yep. And that part can get frustrating on a management side of things because one way is an hour 15, hour 20-minute trip, right? And it takes time out of the day and what have you. So it's you gotta balance that a little bit.
Can you elaborate on your capital roads plan? You said that it's on a 12-year rotation, correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
And you have 77 miles, but then you gave 4.4 miles worth of capital improvement. Said 0.82, 1.05, and 2.6, which equals 4.4. Well, that only equals 48 miles essentially every 12 years. That leaves 30 miles unobtained. So how do you do every 12 years based on 4.4 miles?
Well, see, the
There's
total
some-
the total
Go
road
ahead, Chris.
mileage, the total road mileage that is there is also including gravel. And as far as our paving plan, that it's not factored into that. That would be on a different, I guess, scenario, I guess you'd call it, because for the most part, we have one town like Castle Hill that has the majority of the dirt roads there.
So how does the function, I realize you said that by population, but obviously the maintenance cost for dirt roads compared to paved roads are two different formulas. So if you're using, how does the amount of work required for the various types of roads correspond to the cost per community?
So we try to keep it on a 12-year rotation for as far as the paving schedule is concerned. And what capital project we're going to be doing on the paving side. As far as taking care of our gravel roads, hauling in gravel, what have you, that's part of the regular operating budget itself, where Chris and I just sit down and he talks about what roads he's looking at for as far as using a grader on and what, ditch working that needs to be done. All of that we do internalize with his regular operating budget. We look at how much gravel he may need to even haul into as well, and what he's going to be needing to utilize. That is not really something that we keep track of mileage wise, for as far as, like we're only going to do so much dirt road this year, like we did with the paving. We just take care of the dirt roads as we go.
So you don't separate, so just looking at the formula, you don't separate out the paving needs from the dirt road needs from the rest of the operations of Public Works. It's just the lump sum budget is based on operating as a percentage of that formula versus what each town puts in for capital needs in a reserve account to take care of what they plan to do that year. So
that's the capital road plan is completely separate from the operating budget. Yes.
That's a good question.
When's the last time they had to hire a lawyer?
When's the last time we had to hire what?
Your turnover rate on your employees and your highway department.
You get the payroll by 4.
Oh, was that before I was hired or after I was hired? No, I'm just joking. We have a very low turnover rate actually in our highway department. Like I stated, Chris has been with the highway department for 16 years. We just had someone retire from the highway department for 16 years, and unfortunately, we had a loss where we had an employee who had passed away. So that had happened, bam, bam, bam. So we do have a relatively green crew because of that. But prior to that, most of our employees had been with us for at least 10 years or more.
How many applications did you have when you're looking to fill those slots?
When I needed to fill after the first gentleman who had retired, we had well over 10 applicants, which for our area is really well. Over time, that has dwindled. I mean, but qualified applicants versus actual applicants, you really want to make sure that, for me, we can teach someone how to do this job. But at the end of the day, they also have to fit in the crew and in the atmosphere that we create and the environment that we're trying to create in the office as well. So that to me outweighs. Chris has a different viewpoint. And we work really well together on that. He's looking for skill as well. I think sometimes skill can be taught. And if you have someone who is dedicated and
work ethic is one of the biggest.
Has a great work ethic. The rest of it can be taught.
I mean, our department, to where we're smaller like that, to where you don't just have laborers, you don't just have truck drivers, equipment operators, mechanics. We're all subject to everything, actually. So you have to try to, when you try to source someone, you have to try to find somebody that is, I guess you could say,
Jack of all trades,
multi-skilled, right? So it's harder to find people like that, but you can find them.
That's kind of the concern in this area. I mean, demographics, do you have any idea of average age in your community versus retirees?
Depends on which community you're talking about. Castle Hill is mostly a senior populated town. Chapman is a good blend. They also have one of the highest average median incomes in Aroostook County. Mapleton, on the other hand, has a lot of younger families that are coming in. They're of a younger generation than the other three towns. So we have a pretty good mix.
What salary was offered to your newest?
Did you hear that? That was a question about
Yep.
salary in terms of like,
Yep.
new employees versus veteran.
Depending upon what position we're looking at. If we're in this case, if we're talking about a highway truck driver, I always look if they're coming with some type of background, and I try to count at least 1 year for every 1 year that they have. Let's say if they worked at DOT, for instance, and they want to come work for us. For every 1 year that they may have worked at that other place, I give them at least a half a year with us. So I try to, and we have a pay scale as well that's reviewed on an annual basis. We also set in on that pay scale to have COLA adjustments based upon the state's COLA revenue from August to August of each year, that they're looking at what the cost of inflation is, and that is hit on the minimum wage. We do the same thing with our pay scale. So I starting off with my highway crew is $24 an hour, I believe.
And does that also include health benefits like your other municipal employees, or is that just what else on top of salary is offered?
So they have the rate per hour, plus we are in main purse. We also offer, we're in the health trust as well. So we also offer the health benefits, the vision, the eye, the dental as well. Then we contribute to a 457 if they're here after 3 years, and it's a certain percentage. First 3 years is 2.5%. At 5 years, that goes to 3%. I'm sorry, Chris.
3.5, and then to 5 after 10.
And then 5 after 10. So we do try to have a relatively competitive benefit package as well.
So what is the cost for that employee for that first year with their benefits included? $24 an hour.
Yeah, so if you have $24 an hour, you can add about 40% on top of that for your benefit costs.
Any more questions from the committee?
Okay, well, we really appreciate you guys both joining in on this conversation and helping answer some questions that both the committee and some members of the community have had. Really appreciate your time. Sandra, if I have any follow-up, okay, if I reach out?
Absolutely, you know how to get in contact with me, Kevin.
I sure do. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Chris.
both. Thank you, Chris. Nice to meet
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Nice to meet you as well.
Thank you. See ya.
Thank you. I got it wrong. Good time.
Yeah. See ya.
Oh, chair goes fast.
We just reached it.
He's got a long society. Oh, gonna leave nothing. You were slow. Slide around.
Perfect.
Back to everybody.
Good.
It's a good point, Seth. Good point on the dirt road versus paved road.
Shouldn't address any of the equipment needs either. So if you have one town that's 50% dirt, you gotta buy a specialized piece of equipment, you're gonna share that with the 3 other towns.
But having no dirt
10%
or
or not.
little dirt.
Depends if the grader's gonna serve as another plow backup if one's down. Some towns are still using graders to slush patrol or.
If you think you can find a grader operated and a plow with, then you have definitely found a unicorn. And that's not gonna be for $24 an hour, I can tell you that.
Right.
Well, that price is, you're talking Aroostook County.
Yeah, right,
That's a whole nother ballgame. So that's not the budget we're looking at. It's more about their cost share formula and their interlocal agreement.
Yeah.
And I did use theirs to try to draft something, which is the next part of our
Mhm.
conversation. So I don't know how many of you guys had a chance to read through this. I finished it at, I don't know, it was 11 o'clock at night on Friday. Or so. So there are some things in here that definitely, you know, like as Andy and I were talking about it, need further clarification or should have more clarification. We don't have to answer those today, but if there are certain things that stood out to you, I didn't develop a cost share formula yet. I haven't done an org chart yet or any board bylaws. One of the big differences between what this proposes and what the setup they have is that I looked at it from more like there's a managing municipality, because not all services of the town, two towns are done by one entity. I approach it more like managing municipality. So, and I didn't specify which one it is in this. It has a clarifying, the communities will decide, the select boards would decide that as part of it. This interlocal agreement, after it's cleaned up and people are on board with it, I haven't even shared it with our attorney. All I've done is say, one town would be responsible for managing the staff would be of one town. That is so that you don't have part of a crew or a crew that's in one town have different benefit package or different pay scale, pay rate than the other town. And therefore, if those two people on either side of the bridge are working together and one's upset that their perception of their value for this entity is different, is unfair. So that's one way to address that. Something I dealt with in Bar Harbor, where you had Bar Harbor Police Department and the
Yeah,
Mount Desert Police Department. They were one department, but they were always competing every time their contracts came up. And
One chief and
one chief, one deputy chief, and two different
the
crews.
officers were unique to each town.
Correct. So it became kind of a contentious job where, you know, you'd end up having employees that were in Bar Harbor. When the contract got better in Mount Desert, would just go over to Mount Desert and then back.
Right.
And then back. So that's one of the reasons why I propose it this way.
And they're looking at doing it this way too now, that department.
Oops, I canceled the Zoom meeting, didn't I? Yep. I left the meeting because Sandra and I left Paul out there in the dark.
Zoom still, the owl still sees you.
Okay, so as long as you have it over there. Good.
Did folks have a chance to look at the draft interlocal?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a good start, certainly.
I mean, for me, the areas that really still scare me are the withdrawal process. If we wanted to terminate something, I hate talking about that as one of the first things to talk about because,
But it's the thing that we have to, I mean.
but it's the piece that I still don't have a ton of clarity on, and something Andy and I were talking about at some extent this afternoon. Which I don't mind jumping to, coming back up, but. The way I perceive this is there's a joint oversight board. It's made up of 4 voting members, 2 appointed from each town. And they shall serve as the decision makers.
And are those select board members that are, or,
No, yeah,
or is that not
2
necessarily?
appointed by each town, so I
So
guess.
just, it can be any member of the public.
I was thinking select board members, but I didn't write that in here.
Okay,
I guess that doesn't matter. You might actually want people who have a lot of experience in it,
that aren't necessarily in the select board as
you might.
part of that.
I mean, obviously you'd be a good person to put on that kind of board, given your experience, but a town may not have that in the select board role forever,
Well, or I might not have time.
or you might not have time, but they can do it anyway. And then the town managers would serve as ex officio meetings, so it's 2 appointed.
Did they have 3 town managers? Yeah.
No, one, Sandra's,
Three-town clerk.
Sandra's the manager for all 3 towns.
Okay.
So her job, and she is very, very particular. She says on Wednesday at 4, I'm meeting with this board, at 4:30, I'm meeting with this board, and at 5, I'm meeting with this board, and we're done.
Mhm.
And that's what she does. So she's forced to be reckoned with. These board members. Are I also put quorum as 3, so if only 3 people show up for the meeting, or if 3 people show up for the meeting, you can have the meeting, but all 3 need to vote in favor of something if they're voting on anything. They are in charge of approving or adopting the policies and standards and service levels. They're recommending the annual operating committee budget that gets submitted to each town. They would appoint, they would review the evaluation and would be in charge of the final removal of a public works director. And I specifically point to the town managers as being those that make the recommendations for those that the board approves or denies, I guess. Dispute resolutions, adopt bylaws, yeah, so sort of the overview. And then the public works director, I didn't specifically say it, but would probably serve as the road commissioner. Now this committee has the ability to go in and add questions to these things. So if we don't get through a ton tonight, and you want to go through it, you're welcome to just go in and highlight things and add comments.
Is
Make
there a charter
recommendations.
requirement to have a road commission?
State law.
State law says it, but you can get around that state law if you have a charter. The charter can then clarify what that role is.
That, okay, because I mean, obviously, a lot of municipalities don't have a road commission, they have a public works director, so I just.
Yeah,
Curious.
because when they establish their charter, it typically will specify that the public works director also serves as the road commissioner.
Okay, yeah, that's
And
what.
therefore, the board doesn't have to, or the council, or whatever form they set up, doesn't have to replicate that every year. But like Newcastle, every year we have to reappoint who our road commissioner is. I don't know if that's written in your charter or what it is.
Kevin, I don't see anywhere in this, I've read through it a couple times, I may have missed it, where you've taken a stab at who's gonna pay what percentage, what town's gonna pay what percentage.
I haven't even gotten there yet. I got as far
I
as,
just wanna make sure I didn't miss it.
you didn't miss it. No, the cost share. A couple of meetings ago, we did show examples of what could be done.
And
I
there's 3 or
didn't-
4 different, based on what Mapleton, Chapman and Castle Hill had.
Yeah,
Kevin, mocked up like 3 or 4 different scenarios, kind of based on a combination of all of those things that they had, valuation, population, road miles, I mean, all of a bunch of different ways.
Daryl was very adamant about the one that reduced the cost the most for Damariscotta.
Right.
Yeah, it was like a 30-70 split.
Right.
I think it was square miles,
Could have been.
based on square miles of the towns.
Kevin, does your document address how you're gonna handle the potential for unionization?
It only mentions it if applicable, but yeah,
Does that necessarily change in your mind a lot of things if a group of employees were to unionize under this agreement?
I would think so, because they're gonna use both personnel policies to make their union. They're gonna negotiate based off of personnel policy, and they're gonna take whichever benefit is of significant value the most, I would think, right? So if one town doesn't necessarily have that same benefit, you'd wanna have it outlined on who's gonna negotiate and what. And you know, if I'm a town of Newcastle employee, and I know that I am of local that represents another organization, and that other organization has a different personnel policy, but just because I'm going to bargain for that other town
Right.
personnel policy.
That's not any different than any other 3 towns being pulled in some way, right? I mean, we have a police department that's unionized. They're gonna
But
pull.
what I'm getting on, Andy, is who sets up the negotiation board as a representation to negotiate that contract.
Those employees are members of the managing municipality. That's the way I set this up, was that, let's say the towns decide that Damariscotta is gonna be the managing municipality. All of those public works employees would be employees of Damariscotta. And it would be up to the manager of that town to do this personnel and administrative authority,
As currently written.
as this is written.
Right.
As drafted. Is that different? Is it and then. That's how the budget gets then decided. And
Is there a
brought to the
board
board.
that's gonna negotiate that?
It's the manager who would negotiate those. In every town I've worked in, it's the manager and staff that negotiate union contracts. Only the board makes the final decision to ratify that contract. So that contract would have to be ratified by the managing municipality's select board. And then based on that, the budget would have to be developed. That would be recommended by the committee. For the joint working board, operating board, that then comes back to the boards for vote and the town to vote on.
Okay, I hear you. My point still stands that if I am negotiating a contract, cause the likelihood of this going union is extremely high, right? If I'm negotiating a contract, Damariscotta has a set cost for a certain amount of benefit that he's negotiating. You gotta hire. I'm going to use, without representation from you on the board to negotiate, I could strong arm him into paying a higher rate. Because I'm looking at your benefits. So without a good cross set and establishing who's gonna negotiate the benefit and when it's gonna come in, I could effectively levy the two towns against each other. So you might wanna consider how you're going to set up ahead of time, whether it's going to be a committee, but one person or another is going to be put in a position where he may have to justify an expense against somebody else.
I mean, it might make sense for both managers to be involved in contract
Mhm.
negotiations of each
Address
town.
union potential.
That way you stand up in town meeting and you don't say, well, of course they negotiated that way because Damariscotta has a benefit of X, Y, Z, well, Newcastle doesn't.
Well, there's two different ways, and I'm not, you look at it from the perspective of the employer and the perspective of the employees. The employees, you're gonna bring hopefully representation, whether you're doing it on your own as the employee representing the rest of the group or some labor negotiator. You're gonna look at more than just the two towns' policies and who's got the better policy set up, right? So as the employee in that team, you're gonna look at Waldoboro, Wiscasset, Boothbay Harbor, Boothbay Harbor and Boothbay Harbor have their own each, but you're gonna look at all those neighboring ones, like just like you do from the employer's perspective, the two towns' interest, it would make sense maybe to have at minimum both managers involved in that so that both are privy and aware and thinking about both interests.
In our case, since they're using Falmouth, you probably would use Falmouth as a comparison.
I can tell you, you will not be able to negotiate Mapleton's prices against down this part of the world.
Well, no. Not like,
Or what's with Falmouth?
Yeah.
Wasn't the study based off of a comparison with Falmouth?
No,
It
Was one in time, because that's what your consultant said.
I mean, if Paul had pulled a resource from the town of Falmouth as an example, it
That
wasn't a
was the
study,
snow
it was, you know,
policy.
based solely on
Well, that's
that.
the example.
We're trying to bring in, policies, and this isn't new to.
That was a snow
town,
and
I
ice
mean, so-
policy that was from Falmouth.
Yeah, so I mean, the shared
That's
aspect's the new
definition
part,
of
but we're trying to pull policies and these agreements from other places that have them. What's worked, what doesn't work, let's pick them apart to find a way to either make it the most, either bulletproof or find that that's just not gonna work, right? And so all we're trying to do is just make sure that we're getting this. This is great. I mean, having this many folks here, I mean, super helpful, to make sure that we're seeing these from different perspectives, because sometimes it's easy just to see it from
yeah, I mean, I'm curious,
an
like,
aspect.
you all are here to see what we're doing, and I'm curious what your perspectives are, in terms of what are we getting wrong?
You really wanna know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do,
Okay.
I'm asking.
My question, I guess, is, and I didn't hear how this meeting came about with the selectmen. Or was the committee charged with forming a public works or studying the feasibility of a public works?
Studying the feasibility.
Oh, you got something going on in the background there. Muted him.
Well, if that's the case, in my personal opinion of watching 4 or 5, whatever meeting you've had, I've watched them all on or either attended. It has always been my opinion that you're trying to sell this to the board of directors and the town the town taxpayers, rather than present whether this is feasible or not. Just, that's my opinion, watching what you're trying to do, looking at your figures that you put together, looking at your agreement. It just seems to me like this looks like a great big sales job rather than the feasibility of whether this is really working on. And I understand you've got to put figures to paper before you can come up with a logical deduction of whether this will work or not. But in my opinion, it hasn't been that way.
Larry, the last meeting we had in Damariscotta where we presented this information to the select board, there were members of that board who said they want to see the final numbers. And both boards have now said, yeah, you've given us sort of the overview of what you think is going to happen, including initial costs will probably be higher. They still want to see it. They asked us to finish this effort.
And part of a feasibility study is whether or not we can sell it.
That's right, exactly.
So that's, I mean, that is our guiding principle is, does it make sense to do this? And part of it making sense is, well, if it makes sense to us, can we make it make sense to everybody else?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, my opinion is it makes sense to you guys to do this. From an outsider's looking at your meetings and whatnot, it doesn't make a lick sense. Just based on your numbers or what numbers you've thrown out there. Okay. I bought a lot of trucks, so I know a little something about trucks. And the numbers you're putting out here for all this equipment when I don't come close to being realistic. And who's gonna work on, and what's gonna cost to get them worked on, and who's gonna drive, who's gonna operate, and what's gonna cost to do that. And using the numbers that I looked at this weekend and today.
Would you be willing to spend some time and put numbers to what you think it would actually cost?
Well,
I would talk about
I mean,
it, consider it.
I'm curious.
Well, and I'd welcome one thing, the numbers we put that were tied to the agenda that you can get to doesn't have the capital outlay cost right now in that. It's 1.7 and 1.5 roughly for the premium and standard level of service. The amount of equipment needed to meet each of those is something that, some of that you're gonna go down in the weeds. Do you buy new? Do you buy used? Do you lease? I mean, so there's a lot for Kevin and I to try and put together, here's the number for these two scenarios. And there's a lot more that the committee and the public need to kind of weigh in on. So we're trying to come up with basically a spreadsheet and kind of tool that would help us on the capital outlay, figure out how to make those numbers adjustable. So under this scenario, here's what it would be. Under this scenario, here's what it would be. And you can look at what those annual costs would be if you annualize it over 5 years, 6 years, whatever the payback is. What I put in there was a breakdown of premium and standard level of service being met with the different types of equipment, how many for each type of equipment. So you can see what's in there and what we were thinking for those two service levels to be met. A slightly less amount of equipment under the standard level of service to be met, so to speak, versus that premium level.
Right. The intent of here was to check in on progress and actually talk about factoring in if we're gonna buy vehicles, are we buying new, used? There's no dollar amounts in here for them. So none of that's been developed yet, because the point of meeting tonight was to try to get some of that information from members of this committee. And then, or Paul.
When I was like, you and I have worked on them, they've presented them before as part of a capital outlay. And right now our focus is on the meeting from the two select boards and the public presentations was, let's focus on both service level options as a guidepost for, we presented kind of one at that point as a premium level package. And this board said, both boards were like, we want to see what it would be for the other level of service too. And so that's what we're trying to run parallel and come up with a easy tool that's available for the public and digestible. Because there's so many factors and ways to approach the purchasing. The building costs, we have no idea. We can go, okay, sure, it's $600 a square foot for a finished building, but until you start talking about the size of this space and how many bays, and so I think the policy part kind of dictates, and the service level kind of dictates in some ways some of those purchases and some of those numbers, and that's where we're trying to work on that tool. And so
you got a fellow right here, it's got a lot of wheels, he can probably tell you right off the top of his head what a new wheel with the plows.
I'm sure it's pushing 300, 350.
For New Wheeler?
New wheeler with all the,
$470,000.
there you go.
Where are you buying the truck?
You're not, excuse me for a second. There's no way in the world you're gonna start a highway department spending a whole fleet of brand new equipment. You're gonna have to work through that process of what's new, what's slightly used, so that you can actually get into the whole equipment process, that you're putting your cart before your horse because you haven't figured out whether you want to have a big department or a small department. You just heard they run 70 miles with 4 people. Is Damariscotta or Newcastle going to be happy with 4 people? That's a choice you have to make. So you have to kind of work through that whole process. I mean,
Roads and eight on the roads and areas.
Well, but that's what we have to do. That's what this discussion is about, is what level of service are we got? Are we gonna be happy with 4 people servicing our 60 miles of road? Probably not. So it doesn't make sense to do a cost analysis based on.
Roads down here are different than there, a lot different.
Yeah.
A lot different.
Older,
You know, and they probably can plow the 70 miles road up there with 4 trucks. There's no traffic to speak of like we have around here. It's wide open. They have no basic town like that.
There's a lot more wind blow though. I'm sure they have to go back and
Absolutely.
hit it more often.
Absolutely. There's just nowhere near the traffic that there is down here on the coast.
Yeah.
Now you plow all 77 miles, might not see 10 cars.
Well, they're also using some additional preventative, it sounds like. I mean, we don't use a additive other than what they put in as an anti-caking agent, so to speak, in the salt, right? And so they're using some things, and the calcium chloride's gonna be more effective at the temps we had this morning than road salt is until the sun comes out.
But that's an additional expense.
An additional expense for improved efficiency, as you know, as Paul teaches the course and, you know, talks about the different types of materials you can use.
We've all taken those courses, but you have to add that to your equipment cost.
Absolutely.
100%, right?
Absolutely.
And then on top of that, then you gotta add that to your maintenance costs. My concern here is that the ability of the board to come up with a realistic budget to be able to accurately depict that to the public is not going to be close to what it actually is. Once you start this process and you get this agreement, there is no easily going back. And you can't adequately budget, regardless of what he as a consultant is, you cannot adequately budget for the soft costs and for the hard costs to be a reasonable. I guarantee you that you have a 20 to 30% difference once you implement a department. If you're truly interested in starting a public works department, then you would have modified, which is what we've done in Newcastle to get some line items associated, your service contracts, and taking one piece and added it every year and bought one hard capital component every year for 10 years. And taken 5 miles away here and 10 miles away there and gradually built your budget up. You yourselves just said that you're gonna maintain 60 miles of road. You're not. That's a lie. That is not correct. You're not going to maintain 60 miles. You're gonna plow 60 miles of road, but you're not maintaining 60 miles of road. You've only got about 10 and we've only got about 20 of actual town miles that we have to maintain. The rest of it are state roads. So when you're basing your numbers off this and you're presenting it to the public, that is an inaccurate information that you're giving to folks.
The separation of summer and winter is allocated in some of the documents we've had in the past meetings.
Okay, if it is, then your cost needs to change dramatically. Because you can't base your numbers off of 60.
For plowing.
No, whatever your cost, you're basing your cost basis off of what it costs for any department off of 60 miles.
Right, so we established, the start of this was establishing the cost of winter maintenance. Cost of winter maintenance for us with contracts, and you being one of our contractors and our road commissioner for Newcastle. Understanding that this is what it takes for these 2 towns to contract out for plow.
Did you take away what you received back from the state?
The $35,000.
To cover all road maintenance, winter, and I mean, mostly for summer maintenance, not really winter plowing.
Well, you don't get reimbursed for summer maintenance from the state for state roads.
We don't touch state roads.
You get reimbursed from the state for
No,
winter
but
maintenance.
the money from the state,
Money was supposed to be for capital needs initially.
it's shifted to.
It's shifted to anything operating. It's not, doesn't have to be directly for capital. And it's only about $35,000 for Newcastle.
Yeah, that's about 25 for us.
So initially establishing this was to say, cost of contracts has gotten to the point where does it make sense to do this in-house ourselves? Because while I value what you do for, removing snow in our community and the quality is there, I pay it a significant amount hourly. When you think about it, I don't have that.
How many hours do you think that it is?
It's for the number of hours for the whole winter.
Yeah, how do you arrive at that number to be able to say that it's expensive per hour? What do you think that the cost is for the last 2.5 weeks has been?
Pretty high, I'm sure, but then they're not working for the next 3 weeks if there's no snow. So there's the risk of you have a really bad winter and you're taking a hit versus a really soft winter where you're not taking a hit.
They're not working, Kevin, but you still have the expense to have them there for 40 hours.
So that's in part where our boards are at. It's like the two towns combined are paying about $1.2 million roughly for winter operations. And so we're just looking at it as.
Could we do the same thing for $1.2 million?
Right.
Just to do winter maintenance?
Materials and everything, and you think you can do that for 1.2 million?
We're not saying whether we think we can or not. That was the task to look at. That's what we're trying to come up with is policies, the standard level that drives the amount of cost that we need to make a service level be met for the community. And so that's where we started.
8 months. Yeah, what do
Right.
you do the other 8 months? Yeah.
You do a lot of deferred maintenance that hasn't been happening, at least for Damariscotta. We've got a crew of 2 maintaining 15, 16 miles of non-state aid roads, non-state owned roads, local roads. And I'll say that we're behind. We've been behind for years. So we're still trying to catch up. And so you got a certain amount of ditch miles that you should be doing every so often, 3 to 5 years, depending on how deep they are and how they're getting filled in. If you don't keep up on that and your culverts are failing prematurely, you got issues with your roads, you got issues with the shoulders on the side of your road if the water's not getting off the roads. I mean, there's so many places we could walk through Damariscotta and look at those roads where deferred maintenance has caused premature early capital replacements. So if we were to truly put the resources we should be to routine summer operation maintenance, there'd be a need for a certain amount of people, more than 2, in my opinion.
Do you think with your crew that you can prep and be ready for a pavement for the number of miles that that we're currently paving with a crew of 4 or 5 guys? Are you gonna be ahead of that to be able to do that every year? Well, before you answer that, let me ask you, do you think that other towns on using that model are able to be ahead of that and have to get that done as well?
This is all part of what we're here to be doing. We don't have an answer for you today on it. This is all part of what we need to think about, what we need to find out and determine, and then present whether it's is feasible and whether it makes sense or not.
So I guess that begs the question of why are we coming up with interlocal agreement language and not understanding what the true costs are and deriving that answer first and then coming up with how it would be broken out with the budgets?
So our agenda covers everything, most of the things we need to consider and keep looking at. We are continuing to work through this process. We are not asking the voters to approve anything today, next month, or 2 months from now, or 3 months from now. Like, we're still working through this. These
Can I answer the interlocal agreement? The reason that we're talking about the interlocal agreement is because one of the biggest red flags for the boards was this failed
What happened
already.
before?
What happened before failed, and so before we look at joining forces again or attempting to, what does that interlocal agreement look like? So part of our job is to come up with what we think an interlocal agreement would look like that might work. So while we're spending the time to do the cost analysis, we're also spending the time to do an interlocal agreement so that we're not putting the cart before the horse. We're trying to look at this feasibility study as all-encompassing feasibility. Does it actually make sense? Can we actually come up with an agreement that would work if we can make dollars and cents work?
It feels like there's implied savings, though. You guys have no numbers backing that up.
There are implied savings anecdotally, right? Our consultant has told us that communities that have public works departments save upwards of 40% over communities that have contracting
You know what
services.
communities he's basing that on?
That's a broad spectrum of communities. I don't know if that's statewide or region-wide, but it's.
Roof is 40% for plowing and 40% for maintenance.
Or winter operations.
So just for plowing.
I believe that's correct. Can you speak to that, Paul?
Yes. I used to run 90% contracted, and I can tell you from what is real, meaning if we did it ourselves, which we had plenty of employees, we had 375 our own people, and we had 3,200 contractors. I wrote the contract for the contractors, paying $225 to $230 an hour. Our people were certainly not making that, but we bought equipment. We did snow and ice removal, and we did the analysis of the personnel. Now, I had a bigger department than you guys do. We didn't have gravel, but it's well worth the time and effort to explore all avenues, whether it's cost effective or not. But I think you'll find without a profit motive, municipal employees are cheaper.
Well, I would.
But your equipment, I mean, it's not just the.
So I would agree with you if you're basing that cost over a 12-month service period and not over a 6 months, one specific action. I completely 100% agree with you because you're going to try to utilize that for something else. But you can't use snow plowing as your basis to rule out the contracting. I can tell you that by far, we are doing far more maintenance to a much higher degree at a much lower cost in the town of Newcastle than we are in anywhere else in the state of Maine. Last fall, the city of Augusta put out almost 3 miles worth of road with not even half of the scope of work that we do in Newcastle, and came in at $2.3 million. And we're doing a better scope this per mile at around 800 to 900,000. So there's no way that you can take real world numbers that we're spending every day and forecast them on a piece of paper and convince me that that is saving any taxpayer any degree of money. If I'm basing it just on winter, absolutely. A contractor is going to have his money wrapped up in 4 months. It's going to obviously be inflated. But the Maine Department of Transportation has done obviously their homework and is getting out of the snowplowing business for a reason.
They don't have any people. That's their reason.
And what makes you think that you're going to have those people?
Not paying $19.
So our boards haven't directed us to stop because of the challenges that exist, right? So we're still gonna do the due diligence for them to look at this, right? We are not blind in assuming that it's gonna be easy to find people should we get to the point where we need to, right? We're not, there's a lot to it to take on and construct and own and bring all that into focus, and maintenance is a big part of it when you have breakdowns, because you will, period. But there are towns around us and across the state that run public works departments that proven it works. That are modeled to some degree. We are all different. We all have different service standards to meet. The savings that in the beginning that we talked about were, in some part based on an assumption, should both towns be interested, like any other two towns, be interested in creating a public works or expanding a public works department, there's savings to be made by having one instead of two buildings, by sharing some of that reserve equipment. I'll speak for our contract requires the plow contractor to have surplus equipment, basically. Prove to us you have the capacity to meet our needs. So we should probably assume that we're going to expect to have a couple trucks in reserve because something's going to break. And you can't just stop for 6 hours or more or a day or two and wait for the parts to come in and get fixed. So you have to presumably keep meeting the standards. So the savings we talked about initially were assuming both towns were looking at either expanding or building, is you can cut down some of those big costs, capital costs, by sharing some of those big specialty items or otherwise. That was one caveat of assumed savings.
Would you, I'm just curious, a little bit of a side note, but I'm just curious to see would you say that school consolidation is cost savings to join resources or not?
Depends.
Okay, so we had a consolidated school for years and years and years under the premise of that, and found that that is not the case. And now that has broken up into 3 different factions, right? And we are not sharing those costs across the
So
board.
the towns of Newcastle, Damariscotta, and Bremen are sharing a school, 3 communities that found that the cost for those 3 communities in particular, relative to what they were paying for essentially contracted services through the AOS, were the same, arguably, with the difference of 10, 20 grand maybe, for those business services to be met. solely for those three towns rather than a share of. And so, as it always depends, right? What's the service level you're expecting? What's the amount of money you're paying for that today? And running and understanding, can we get the same service level or acknowledge that it's gonna be different one way or the other for the same or less?
And every community in the state that has an AOS is trying to figure out how to get out of it, because you have too many towns with too many boards or administration to have to attend and participate in. You can't even find superintendents who'll take those jobs.
Yeah, RSUs are.
Agreed, and that's why I'm trying to draw what I'm trying to ask is, don't you think that that will be a similar case here under a more complicated? The issue of education, complicated, not defacing that, I'm just saying, but they're talking about education, you know. Public works, multifaceted. You've got multiple different occupationals involved under one hat. Definitely a harder conversation to have to recognize that cost sharing. And yet we are under the impression, or what's led to believe, until your proper figures and stuff come out, I can appreciate that, is that it is going to have a cost savings. But the reality is that we just don't know until you finish your process. But as long as the information that you're providing to the people is accurate and it is actually true, then it is. I'm hedging my bets 110%, that if you put real numbers on paper, that you're gonna find that it's going to cost you a lot more money to do that. Been doing this my whole entire life. I can change a set of cutting edges on a plow in 15 minutes, all day long. Probably 20 if I had to do it by myself. With an extra set of hands, I can do it in 15 minutes. We have employees now that the other day, to all your discussions, took 6 hours to change that same set of cutting edges, because they don't have the ability and the skill set, and that's all that's left. So when you're putting real numbers together to build a budget, where is the percentage of you allowing for that type of learning curve and that type of cost and that type of operational expense that is going to present to the taxpayers a true, concise number of what this is going to cost? We're seeing it in industry every day. Public Works in South Portland, double-digit tax increase in wages this year. Fire is the same way, and so is the PD. You're not budgeting for that in your proposal.
I have a comment to make. I've been around heavy equipment quite a few years and bought some myself, so. And I think that we ought to think about growing into this, what we're doing here. Start off small. You can have a joint contract with a contractor to come in and help when we have the big storms. You're not gonna be able to jump out there and get it done right away. And if we can grow into it, maybe buy 1 truck or 2 at first for a couple of years and see how it goes. And then we wouldn't be at such a risk. This is a big risk, huge, that we're taking for the town. And we've got other projects going on in town here that are costing us a lot of money. And we gotta start taking our mill rate and dropping it how much we have to pay for our property taxes here. It just has to happen. So, it's just my comment is that really, if we could take it easy, go up, because I am in favor of the public works department. But I don't want to spend more money than we're spending now for our public department.
So one issue with, and I agree, like, if we can start small, that's great. We don't have any facility right now
In Newcastle.
in Newcastle. We have a tent that houses our sand and a shed next to it. And beyond that, we have nothing. So to start small, we still need a building. So does it,
Not necessarily. I lived in a small town, we didn't have a building for our public housing. But
maybe I'm wrong.
I would echo this to his point. If you ease your way into it and you learn, you gain the experience of the growing pains ahead, it saves you money in the end. Regardless of where you put it, you're gonna need 2 buildings. You're gonna need a sand building, you're gonna need a salt building, regardless of where you put it. Minimum, right?
Yeah.
So even if Newcastle, I'm being facetious here, just bear with me for a second. Even if Newcastle takes an investment and builds a facility out here to house a number of miles. Okay, Damariscotta could easily take their facility and could turn it over and to make that just straight salt and their build and serve both towns over the course of town. And Newcastle's could be straight sand. You're going to be running out of either facility anyways, and you can always have a pile in the corner. But you didn't just buy a new piece of property, build a new building, you're using existing infrastructure, and you're starting. You take 40 miles in Newcastle, and if I'm using 4 or 5 trucks, you buy 1 truck, even if it's used. And put in the contract that we have to help you maintain it and run that truck. Hire 1 guy to help manage for this year. Damariscotta's got 2, but Damariscotta's not doing their plowing per se. So put them in a truck, make them have a route downtown. Be responsible so that you've got to buy the soft costs and get going, and do that for a contract cycle of 3 years. The following year, buy another truck. The following contract cycle, buy another one. Now you're doing half, the contract's doing half.
That's great suggestion. I mean, really, like, this is why I asked, like, we're not trying to railroad anybody into anything. We're literally just trying to figure out the best thing to do for our town. Because you're right, the mill rate's too high. And we're spending too much money on everything. And so if by going.
Bring down the cost of education.
Right, you can't, well, and we can't bring down the
So
cost of
what can we bring
materials. Like, how can we address the things that we can address? And that's what this working group is about, is figuring out, can we address our second highest line item? You know, because we can't do anything about the education budget.
Those functions you can accomplish with a work form put out by the managers, your road commissioners, or however you want to do it, right? Can then be augmented by certain specialty pieces to allow you the advantage to still get your work done and do it at a reduced rate while teaching your own staff by watching other people that have done the work for years.
Yep.
You don't have to have a snow blower, you've got one, and it could serve Andy's town too. Contract that one part of the downtown and have your staff just do all the sidewalks. I'm using this as an example. I'm
Sure,
not saying
no,
this, but
that's.
you take that portion, grow and understand it, and then bring in one piece from a contractor that says, now you don't have to maintain, it's easier, you can blow it over wherever and make that be easy. You don't have to have the expense, you only pay for it when you need it. That's a way to increase the number of people that you have, keep the same service level, and teach people what it's going to do. The following year, you send somebody to a school and get them NetSep certified so they can be your paving inspector for both towns. You don't have anybody on staff right now to do that. And you get that service from us, you do, for free. You pay for the hot top, but I give that to you. That's a value that you can't put on a piece of paper anywhere else.
Things to think about.
Andy, I wanted to address your ditching and whatnot. The reason you got ditched is the town select board over the last 10, 15 years never addressed that problem. It's not that it's all of a sudden just rose its ugly head. It's been there for a long time.
Right.
And to me, it would make more sense to allocate X number of dollars a year for a contractor to come in and do that than to keep 8 men or 7 men on the payroll for 7 or 8 months to do that.
Potentially, yeah.
I mean, if you're talking $500,000, of course, the numbers here, whatever they are. You take that money and pay a Seth or a Rusty Holmes or a Toby Plummer or whoever, and then they have the problems of the equipment, the manpower, the trucks, the whole 9 yards. The town's not burdened with the labor of keeping these guys busy. And when it's pouring rain, they're not standing in the shed. You know what your price is, and we can't beat a man in his own game. There's no way. There's no way that we can beat a man in his own game.
We could become the man.
We could
Right? We
very
could train our
slowly.
people to
Very
do the
slowly,
work.
but all these other towns, Booth Bay, Waldeboro, Wiscasset, though they all had town workforces, public works that are, Waldeboro's I know is 40 or 50 years old. And I think Wiscasset is down there that close. I don't know about Booth Bay, but to do that 50 years ago was a heck of a lot cheaper than it is right now. And they've gradually built over the years.
Do you think it'd be less expensive if we waited another 20 years to do it?
Obviously not.
So.
But don't jump into it all at once. I agree with Seth. If you're gonna try to do this, do it one man to a time.
That's a fair assessment. And I mean, that's good
That
advice.
makes more sense to me.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think that's how most companies start out, right? There's you and your brother, there's you and your dad, or whoever.
Well, recognizing it's now 7:30, I have to get home by 8 to take care of my kid, because my sitter's done at 8. Would the rest of the committee be okay with postponing till our next meeting to address these other items? And hopefully we'll have a little more time to further work on the budget. I mean, really, it's about coming up with a plan for capital. At least as part of that discussion. And then given some of what we heard tonight, I'm sure there's some other items that could be added at the next meeting. Okay,
Yep.
Thanks all for coming.
Set a date for the next meeting.
oh yes.
Oh,
let's do
yeah,
that.
that's item 7.
It is item 7.
It is item-
Jump to item
Jump to
7.
item 7.
Is that our next meeting date?
Yeah. There's still more, so just. Dream on.
I'm very vulgar.
I assume we're gonna push to the new year,
I really don't want to meet on Christmas.
right? I mean, realistically, we're,
Don't fly a cloud, I don't think.
I mean,
They are.
Oh, geez, that. You are really Don Juan.
Today's the 15th.